Welcome to Reel Confab. Conversations on cinema. Enjoy.
Well, thank you, Chandler, for being here.
No problem.
You're the best.
I'm excited.
So, what was the film that made you see cinema differently for basically the rest of your life? Or the first one, I should say.
Yeah, I was about to say I have a few different ones. So I guess I guess I'll give you two. So the first one was I saw Django Unchained in 2012. I was 12 years old. I really should not have been watching that, but it just kind of changed kind of how I looked at movies, and maybe more in a kind of, I don't know if juvenile is the right word. Just kind of, just it's Tarantino, and it's just a big bloody mess, and I just thought that was so awesome at the time, and I had never seen anything like that. But then a couple years later, I feel like there's a more mature entrance, and it gave me the same type of feeling as my aunt took me to go see Grand Budapest Hotel in theaters, and that was the first Wes Anderson movie I saw, and it was just another one of those, like, I didn't know movies could be like this. I didn't know they could look like this. I didn't know that they, just the way that he kind of his stories are always very interesting, and just 100% him, and there's nothing really like it. They got that, awkwardness to it, but it's also a charm of his movies. And yeah, so that really surprised me, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then we got home from that, and she was like, okay, well, if you like that, maybe you'll like this. And she turned on Life Aquatic, and I would like that even more. At the time, I was like, okay, this is just like the best movie ever, and I was obsessed with that for so long. So yeah, those are really the two or three, I guess, that I think about a lot, where I'm like, okay, that's what made me feel like. I remember sitting in the theater watching Grand Budapest and being like, oh man, I really, like, how are they framing these shots like this? Like, how are they making this look like this? Yeah, those are the ones for me.
Yeah, I mean that's fair because I feel like everyone's first time seeing Tarantino is like that because it's so against the grain of what
Yeah,
a
exactly.
regular movie should be. And yeah, I feel the same way about Grand Budapest because I think the first time I saw that movie, that was the first time I ever saw a film with like a different aspect ratio that wasn't
Yeah,
the
yeah.
regular one. And I was like, what is this? What are they doing? Swapping it between the boxy aspect ratio,
Yeah.
the Academy ratio, and then going to the widescreen. But then, because it's like what all the flashbacks and stuff in Grand Budapest are the Academy ratio, and then it's like
Yeah, I think so.
the ones with Jude Law when they're older. That's like the regular film ratio.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I can
No, I mean,
understand that. Because I
yeah, no,
remember the first
it's
time I
just,
saw that one too. When I saw Grand Budapest, I was like, "What is this?"
yeah, it does so much with, I mean, that's like just kind of something that's I like to mess with that kind of stuff now, is like the aspect ratio, or like what they did in Steve Jobs with filming each section of the movie on a different film grain, like shooting it on
Yeah,
60 millimeter, 35 millimeter, and then digital. Like, just stuff like that is always just so interesting to me, to be able to play with the medium like that. And again, like, I was 14 years old. I had never seen anyone do anything like that. So I was just like, oh man, this is crazy. I never even thought about you could change the black bars on the sides. Like, it's just such an interesting concept to me.
but that's the yeah. I feel like that is the coolest part about film is how much it can, I guess, be distorted and warped or
Yeah,
used for the
yeah.
actual story.
And it's kind of just something you don't really think about, especially growing up. Like, that never crossed my mind at all. And then you see it for the first time, and like, you pay attention to it, like, because then you start asking, like, why did they make it like this instead of how most movies are shot? Like, why did they make it that aspect ratio, 4:3 or whatever? Like, that's just I think it makes you think more about the movie and the director's choices behind what they're doing, and I think that's great. I love stuff like that.
So would you say that that kind of stuff helped you want to be like an actor, a writer, a director, where you saw how you started, I guess, piecing together how different things were made with film and how people were tampering with them.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely, again, it's not something I thought about too much. I feel like, I made movies growing up. I technically made my first movie when I was 16 with The Best of Friends, but that one had $0 budget, whatever. I don't really count that now. But then when I did one left in 2020, late 2019, and I started editing it, that's whenever I was like, yeah, okay, so here I am again. Like now I'm in that spot and I can manipulate this in any way I want to. Like I can change it because I mean, one left has like this curved aspect ratio that I feel like adds to like the dream kind of sense that it's supposed to have, and that's really, again, I was like, I can mess with this in any way I want to. I can make it the aspect ratio of an action movie, or I could do the 4:3. But yeah, watching movies and seeing them do that really, just the more I saw how creative people can be with that stuff, especially the small stuff like that, or like behind the camera, like just the unlimited different ways that you can change this stuff. Like that just cemented itself as that's the piece of art that I want to try to be a part of. Like that's what I want to do. You have all these different elements and they all add together, and if they impact somebody, if they give them any type of emotion at all, or make them feel a certain way, it's just there's no other feeling like that. I feel like that's such a accomplishment to be able to do that, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to try to do that the way that these movies are making me feel. I want to try to do that. So yeah, that's really what got me into it.
That's a good way of putting it. I feel like because I remember watching the BAFTA Life in Pictures interview with Fincher,
Uh-huh.
and he kind of says the same thing that you just said, but in a much more Fincher-esque way, where he was like, we take titanium, lasers, lights, lenses, and all this stuff to make this singular thing to try and put an idea into 700 people's heads at the same time, and that's
Yeah.
cinema. And
Yeah.
it's just so weird to think about that it really is just a factory of multiple things having to
Yeah.
come together at the right time just to like
And that's
get this end goal.
I just think that's so interesting, and it's just, that's why it's my favorite form of art, is because it is like a whole bunch, just an accumulation of all these different people doing these separate jobs and putting them all together into one thing. If you take like a painting or a composition, like a piece of music, and it's usually like a singular person making this, or a singular, like a group of, like a smaller group of people doing this. But when you make a movie, you have like tens or hundreds of hands, like all stirring the pot, all putting this thing together. And like when you watch it, I feel like it's almost like there is something living inside a movie. I know that's kind of sounds really weird to say, but it's like it's there's so much there that it feels like it's its own living being. And I feel like a great example of that is the Psycho remake,
Yeah.
because like it's a shot for shot, like he literally recreated the entire movie shot for shot, but those movies feel completely different. And I think that's like one of the most interesting experiments ever, like in all of cinema, just to be able to do that, to be able to, he has his blank check movie, and so he's like, I'm gonna remake Psycho shot for shot, and it feels completely different. And I just think that's so interesting, and I think that's really telling about, like, you can have all these people all trying to even replicate it, but it's not the same people. It's not the same group of artists all coming together to make it, even if they're trying to replicate something exactly. And I just think that's so interesting. And it's like, how do you, like, it's like, I feel like it's not something you can put into a formula. And that's why it speaks to me so much. Like, that's so interesting to me.
Yes, I guess it's that same thing that everyone always says, where it's like the alchemy of film. Like you
Yeah.
can't understand it. Sometimes it's just lightning being
Yeah.
captured in a bottle, and then I mean, even people like Michael Haneke, where he literally makes a shot for shot remake of his own movie, and it
Yeah.
just
Yeah. That's true.
feels different. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's just, I guess, like you said, all the different players that are involved in the actual film
Yeah.
itself, and everyone somehow, I guess, subconsciously just puts their own thing into it. So when it all comes together, it still feels different, even if it's a
Yeah.
replica, literally.
Yeah, I agree. I really think that's what it is. And I don't think it's something that you can write like a formula down and get correctly. Like, you can't get the same result every single time. At least I don't believe you can. I think something's going to be different every time, especially if you're working with a different group of people, which is, I mean, that's just so powerful to me. Like that like makes, I'm like, okay, this is why I'm in love with movies. This is why I want to make movies. Like that is so, it's just so powerful to me. It's so interesting.
How do you think you translated basically everything you just said of like the power of movies and what you feel about? How do you feel like you translated that into making your feature debut Sect, and like how did that motivate you to try and be ambitious with it and do so much with it?
Well, I guess so. Sect has a really, really weird production because it took us over a year to
Yeah.
make it, and it was just a lot of like the script that I had written out for it was like 50 pages, and so much of the movie that how it ends up is not in the script at all. And like, so what we were just talking about, like cinema being a living breathing thing, there is nothing scarier, and I'm not sure, you might have felt this too when you're editing Please Respond, but there's nothing scarier than watching one of your scenes and being like, this feels like a dead animal. Like
Oh yeah.
this feels pointless, this feels useless. Like there's it just this is not a living thing. Like I don't feel like I've captured that magic that makes me fall in love with movies. I don't feel like I've done that, and I get so disappointed in myself, and I have to take a break from editing or whatever. And but I think that motivates me to write more stuff. Okay, so like I'm like, okay, how do I put life into this then? Like how do I find, I mean, it could be a sound effect that just, as long as it fits right, then you get a whole different on it. And so that's
Yes.
really, I mean, that's a huge part of that again, is like you want to capture that same feeling that you get when you watch a good movie or any movie. It's just like, well, you want to capture that when you're making something, or at least that's like the motivation behind what I'm doing, is like I want to display, this story that I'm trying to tell, but it needs to be done in the right way. And so it's really a lot of that. It's like trying to get the right elements in there to make it work, to make it come to life. And there's it's just, again, it can be a sound effect, it could be the background, the score, it could be even a certain color grade of the movie. Like that was a big thing for me too, is I go back and I color grade so many times, and then when I finally find one, it's like, okay, what took me so long to get here?
Yeah,
um
changes the whole mood. I mean,
yeah.
and I feel you. Like it's the most painful thing to watch something that you actually filmed, and then when you're watching it, you're like, this is awful. It's like, but sometimes it motivates you to get more creative, and even
Yeah.
outside of just like Foley or sound effects or just background noise, it's like, how can I maybe edit this in a way to where it's interesting, even though it fucking sucks.
Well, dude, I mean, when you were sending me, you sent me different versions of Please Respond. Um, and when it got to, there is, I liked it. I mean, honestly, I did. I was like, oh, this is good. I was like, I feel like there's something missing, but I can't, put my finger on it. And I kept, like, me and Keith had talks when we first watched it, and I was like, I don't think we're very good in it. I was like, I don't think we're very good in the opening scene. I don't, I feel like we have a lot of issues finding the tone towards the beginning of the movie and stuff like that. And we talked about that a lot. And then when you sent that final edit, and you had the little walkie talkies in the background, and you had the sound effects from the city and stuff like that playing through it, like we both agreed to, like, okay, it clicks. Like we don't have that issues anymore. It clicks. Like that's all it took, was just having that atmosphere to fill it out, because without, that stuff, we're just 100% just focused on how we're delivering every single line, how we're saying every word. But when you added that stuff in there and we got that final version, and you had the black and white color grade on it and stuff, I was like, yeah, no, this is it. Like he
Yeah.
fixed all those things that I was overthinking, that I wasn't thinking was working out of my performance and stuff. I was like, okay, I think he got it. And that's like a great example, I think, of just how small those minute little details can fix something like that.
Yes, because I guess like you said, you kind of want as a viewer for it to feel alive. Like you don't want it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
just feel just this is like a chore to watch.
Yeah.
And like, how do you feel now, knowing after going through everything with Sect and now starting pre-production of your next movie, of
hmm
having a movie on a streaming platform like Tubi?
It definitely, I forget sometimes, and then, you know, it definitely, I think it motivates me more. I mean, that's an issue I have when I finish any project and people are like, "Oh, I really like it." Like immediately there's something just wrong with me, I guess, because immediately my brain just clicks and I'm like, I need to make something better because I now feel bad that these people are watching something that I don't think is perfect. And I was like, I feel like I need to make something else. I need to make something better. And but knowing that I have a movie on a streaming service definitely just feels like, it's a little badge just to wear for now. Like, okay, I got a movie on a streaming service. So technically, I guess I am a director. I can put that on my job description. Not aspiring. I'm a director now. I got a movie on a streaming service.
Exactly.
So that kind of motivates it, but that also like it makes me feel like, okay, now if that's how I'm labeling myself, like I need to get my shit together. Like I need to be on this. I need to do this as professionally as possible. And that's like the thing, we wrote this really long script for this Western now because I was like, we really need to, take this as professionally as possible. With the other things, when it's only like me and like a 3-person crew, I can kind of, we can improv a whole bunch and change a whole bunch. And like, I'm writing down directions like in my notes app and things like that. And that's fine if it's like a really small group of people, but I'm trying to direct, 10 plus people on this next movie. I was like, okay, I need to do this as professionally as possible. I need to get a budget, an actual, and try to make a good movie.
Well, I mean, it's like, I guess, yeah, once you kind of, I feel like though, as you evolve, it's
hmm
always good to be able to have something to look back at and be like, look how far
Yeah,
I've
nah,
come.
definitely.
Like, yeah, of course, every artist is going to be self-critical. Like, I feel like it doesn't
hmm
matter how good of a thing that you'll ever make, you'll always find something to sit there and be like, I could have changed that. I could have done that differently. But it's always just nice to look back and be like, well, I accomplished it and I did it. And for
Yeah.
the time when I made it, that was pretty awesome that we even did that to begin with. And it's
Yeah,
like, as you
I agree.
grow, you can look back and see, I guess, a progression, probably like from
hmm
your first movie, like One Left, to
Yeah.
Sect, to then whatever you're making next. And then after that, like you can just literally see the evolution of your, I guess, artistic abilities and creativity.
Yeah. And I definitely feel like, it's, I don't think anyone can just jump right in and make their best piece of art or their best, movie ever or whatever. Like it's definitely a buildup. Like it's a lot of trial and error. Like you do stuff that doesn't work or does work. You figure out, what kind of shots you were able to get and what locations you're going to be able to get. Like I feel like there's just a lot of trial and error involved. And like, that's why making short films, especially, it just comes in handy so much because you get to experiment like on a smaller scale, um, which is that helps a lot. And that's like a lot of the advice I've seen from directors and stuff. Just say like, yeah, make as many short films as you can before you make a feature, because then you'll already have so many of those kinks worked out by the time you get there. Which, yeah, that definitely is true, but there's still on a movie set, everything that can go wrong is most likely going to go wrong.
Yeah.
You just have to be prepared for that.
Yes, because I guess like I feel like any director, anybody who makes movies, I feel like the biggest teacher ever is just experience. Like you can go to film school all you want, but if you're not behind a camera shooting anything, when you get out there, you're gonna be just
Yeah.
like lost as last year's Easter egg per se. And
I
then
agree.
I definitely feel like the that whole idea behind it is like there's just no teacher really that can teach you as much as just actually getting out in the field and doing it and
Yeah.
filming short films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. You got to put in the work to do it. It's not, you can't watch your YouTube videos and go out there and do it, which I tried to do at first, and it's just not the same. You just got to go out there and do it for real.
And like, I guess from just making movies for you and then also watching more movies and just kind of being a student of it, how do you feel the state of movies is today?
I'm not as, kind of, I don't know if pessimistic's the word. I'm optimistic
Cynical?
about it. Cynical, yeah, maybe cynical. I'm not as cynical as a lot of people are, and maybe I should be, but I try to stay optimistic about the state of movies right now. Just because it's like, oh, we have a million superhero movies a year and stuff like that, but then we get something like last year we got Top Gun and Way of Water, and these are still these huge blockbusters, but they're outgrossed those superhero movies. And I feel like the biggest issue that's plaguing us right now is that's at least, well, it hasn't been the case this year actually, but for the last few years, no one was seeing anything else unless they had a cape on. No one was going and seeing any of these movies, and that makes these companies like, okay, well then we're going to start doing straight to streaming movies and all this other stuff. That's just, if we just get to that point, then maybe it is over. But as long as people are going to see movies in the theater, which they are now, like, I mean, that's what's crazy is, we got Creed 3 and Scream 6, and we got the Evil Dead this weekend is about to make like $50+ million. It's just, we have these movies that are being made on low to mid budget that are making money now, and that's good, because that's what died out for a few years. Those mid budget movies, like, those kind of like went away, and I feel like we're getting those again now. And we're also getting a bunch of these like 3 hour long movies, and like 3 hour long, that's just kind of, I feel like that's another word for, okay, the studio kind of let the director cook on this one.
Yeah.
And that's that's something to be worried about when we are not getting things like that, and we're getting so many of them now. And I think that's great. I think that's amazing, and hopefully that continues. We got a new wave of, like, we got like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers and Jordan Peele all doing their own thing, and they keep kind of their movies keep coming out around the same times, within like a year of each other each time. And this just feels like we're getting a lot of new talent that has their own voice and that can draw audiences on a bigger scale than most. And I think that's great. I think we're going to be okay. I hope so. I hope we're going to be okay.
With those original filmmakers too. I mean, it's just, it's great to see. I'm not as big of a sequel hater, but it's nice to see original stuff like
exactly.
Beau
That
is Afraid coming out, and The Northman and Nope and all that, rather than just like you said, like Scream 6, and it's like Creed 3. It's like, all right.
Yeah, those sequels can make money but when an original movie makes money, that's the most inspirational thing ever. I didn't love Everything Everywhere last year, but at least it wasn't a sequel or a remake or anything. It was its own thing, and it won a bunch of Oscars and made a bunch of money. And like, that's kind of, if you can make movies without many compromises and still make money, then you're going to have a very successful career. And I wish it wasn't based on that. I mean, that's kind of the problem in general, is that it's all based on how much money your movie will make or can make. And that's obviously, we don't get as many good projects or good movies as we would if that wasn't a factor there. But I think right now we're getting a lot of original stories and original artists that are making good art, and hopefully that continues and doesn't die out anytime soon. I think superheroes are on their way out.
Thank God.
I think they're on their way out, and I think people are ready to start watching original movies again or new ideas.
That's the best part. And I mean, I guess, do you think movie theaters will die out with that, or do you think we're actually back on the upslope for that?
I think right now, as we speak right now, I think we're going to be, I think it's going to be okay. I think that, again, those blockbusters like Top Gun Maverick and Avatar, I mean, combined, those movies made like over $5 billion, just those two. And that is insane. And that is going to keep theaters alive if we keep getting stuff like that. I think that's definitely going to keep them alive. And I just hope that that continues. I mean, and I think it's going to. Tom Cruise kind of set out during the pandemic. I mean, he was calling those theaters and stuff and telling them, like, hey, whenever these movies are out, you're going to get Top Gun and Mission Impossible, and it's going to theaters, and it's not going to go to streaming for a really long time or whatever. And it worked. I mean, it worked. And so I think as long as we got people like that are still championing theaters, I think they're gonna stick around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you on that, because even Tarantino and Nolan and
and
people like
Scorsese,
that.
we just have we got a bunch of them that care about the theatrical experience, and that is very, very important.
And Spielberg even like went up to Tom Cruise and said, "You saved movie theaters."
Yeah, exactly. So again, as long as we got people like that they're still using their power to get those movies pushed to go to theaters only, or at least stay in theaters for a month at least before they go on to streaming. That's another problem that's kind of spiking up here recently that I haven't seen a lot of people really mention, is that these movies are going to streaming like within a month of their theatrical release,
while they're still in theaters too.
In theaters. Creed, the beginning of March, and by like the third week of March, it was on streaming. And it's like, but that movie made good money at the box office. So I'm very confused. I do still think it is an uphill battle still, especially Netflix came out the other day and they were like, we're not doing theatrical releases anymore. We don't need to. The way we get our money is by you streaming it on Netflix. So there's no reason for us to do theatrical releases. And it's like the Glass Onion made so much money in the 1 week that it was out. So it's just so stupid and it's messed up. So I think it's still an uphill battle, and a lot of these filmmakers are going to have to put in their contracts. A lot of them already are, but a lot of them are going to have to put in their contracts that they want their movie to release in theaters.
Yeah, and I think Denis Villeneuve did that.
Yeah, he his movies. I mean, they told him before Dune even came out. I don't know how he gets the pull that he does with studios, but they told him before Dune came out that even if it doesn't make its money back, they're still going to give him a sequel and stuff, which is, I mean, what he's doing is incredible right now to make this huge sci-fi epic and have the talent that he has attached to it. I mean, that's great. And I feel like him operating on that larger scale is, again, very inspiring to see. And we got a few people like that right now that I think are going to be very, very important in the future and continuing movies like this and trying to get away from streaming.
That should be the goal, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. These streaming, the streaming, the algorithm, their whole business plan with all these streaming services is going to collapse. Netflix said last year that their whole thing is their business is they have to get new subscribers each quarter, and that's what decides how good they're doing. That's why they didn't care about the Glass Onion box office. And the problem with that is what happens when you get everybody. I mean, like, what do you do? When everybody in the world is already decided if they're going to get fucking Netflix or not? Like, what do you
Yeah,
what
where
do
do
you
you go
do
from
then?
there?
Does your whole business just crumble because they don't do advertising? Well, I think they just started doing advertising on the low tier subscription services or whatever,
Yeah.
but they don't do the advertising's not their main source of revenue. So like, what are you going to do? Like, actually, you have no ads on there, and you're based solely on subscribers, and that's why shows keep getting canceled and movies don't get picked up or whatever through Netflix, is because new subscribers have to subscribe and specifically watch that show or whatever. That business plan is stupid, and it's not going to be able to hold out forever. And especially not, that's just one company saying that, especially not if that's the same business model for, we got like 15 streaming services right now. It's not going to be able to hold up for that much longer. I don't think so.
Yeah, no one wants to pay for 15 streaming services.
Exactly.
And
And
they're going to keep compartmentalizing everything that's getting released. It's like,
mhm,
oh, if you want to see this, you better go to Paramount Plus. If you want to see this, you
exactly.
better go to Hulu. It's
Well, I mean,
like,
that's
all
part
right.
of the streaming thing right now, is they're putting these movies in theaters for a month, and then they're dropping them, and they're like, okay, well now, go subscribe to Peacock and you can watch this movie. And it's like, dude, no one's subscribing to Peacock, bro. Like, I don't care.
Speaking of, I guess, Denise Dune, I
Hmm.
mean, I guess you could technically say it's a remake, even though it's
Yeah.
much
It's an
more,
adaptation.
yeah, I mean, I guess it's more of an adaptation than a remake. But if there was like a dream project, like a movie that you love, that you think maybe could be revamped or revitalized or in any
Uh-huh.
way, like, is there a movie that you would remake, and like, what would be your dream
Hmm.
cast for that?
That's a good question. Um,
Mine would be Stagecoach, and I would do
that
it
would
with
be a
that.
great one.
I would do it with that dream cast that I sent you with like
Uh-huh.
Gosling and Jessica Chastain and all them.
Yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. I really am not sure. Well, actually, so I've been me and Travis have talked a lot about these Universal monster movies, and I don't know necessarily if we'd want to remake it, but we have talked a lot about Frankenstein. I was obsessed with Frankenstein when I was a kid, and I think there's so many themes that you can look into in that story, and it's just such an interesting, compelling characters. Like, I love that story so much, and it's terrifying, but also like it depends on what motivations you give the characters, because there's many adaptations already. And so I've talked a lot about doing Frankenstein, and then I pitched a version of Phantom of the Opera to Travis, and then we looked it up and found out that was they made a book about Phantom of the Opera, and like the story that I pitched to Travis was already real. Like, that was already a thing someone had adapted. So I think I would like to do Frankenstein. I just love that so much, and I think that's so much. I think there's so much to tackle there that hasn't been done with that character, at least not that I've seen. I mean, there's like 100 Frankenstein movies, so maybe it
Yeah,
has, but I
I
would like to do one.
Frankenstein.
I Frankenstein. Yeah.
That would be
But
awesome
see,
to see that.
me and Travis have been talking about that for so long, and it's, the copyright on it's up, so we could technically make that right now if we wanted to. Like, it's free for us to just do whatever
Oh,
we
it's
want.
public domain now.
Yeah, it's public domain. It's just the thing that Universal owns is, like, you can't make him green, and you can't make bolts coming out of his neck.
Oh, that's
And
easy.
it's like, yeah, I don't need either of those. But like, we talked about that, and then now we're getting Guillermo del Toro just announced his Frankenstein movie with Andrew Garfield and Oscar Isaac and Mia Goth, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't know if I can do anything better than that. It's an amazing cast, an amazing director, and a great story. I'm excited. That might just be the end all for Frankenstein movies. If that one's good, I might not feel the need to make another one.
Yeah, Guillermo is pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I'm really not sure. There's a lot of projects that I've kind of thought about, but that's the one that we've kind of joked about recently. And if we were to do that, I mean, we've talked about being Dr. Frankenstein and Travis being the monster.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot. There's a lot of projects that I've looked into, but it really just depends on if I have something new to say with that story instead of doing, making my own story similar to that. If I have something new to bring to the table with that story, that I feel like I need to adapt it. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that's my answer. Frankenstein.
That's a good one. And here's a really hard question. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
What do you think is the most overrated movie of all time, and what is the most underrated movie of all time?
Ooh, overrated.
This is purely subjective, clearly.
Yeah. Well, see, I've been going through and watching, for like the last year, I've been watching the Best Picture winners of every year. I want to do that just because out of curiosity. I'm curious on what human beings chose each year at the Academy Awards for Best Picture. So I've been trying to go through a lot of those, and some of those are just like, this one Best Picture, this is horrible. There's a bunch of those that it's just like, what were we doing? Like Green Book won Best Picture. That is insane. That is
I knew
so insane.
That's what was going to come up.
Or have you seen Crash, dude?
Yeah, Crash is awful.
Oh my gosh, that might be the worst movie of all time.
It's pretty bad.
That might be the worst movie of all time, because like, it's hard, when someone doesn't have a lot of talent and they make a movie, it's not like, I don't necessarily think that it's like, that is not as a big of a disappointment. Like if someone doesn't really have a voice and they're trying to find it and they make a movie and it's just not the best it could be, or if there's just not a lot there or whatever, then that's not as disappointing. But something like Crash, where you have an amazing cast, like a great cast in there, maybe not amazing, but you got a great group of people there, and then the actual, the way the movie looks isn't horrible, but the actual subject matter is just disgusting and terrible. And so the fact that won Best Picture, I think, might qualify for me to call it the most overrated movie of all time.
Yeah, that's a fair choice.
I don't know, I'm trying to think of like any of those big ones that they tell you to watch that you end up, that people end up not liking. But I mean, honestly, most of those, I agree. Like, I'm trying to go like the IMDb top 250. I used to go through those when I was younger, and it's kind of the same thing. Like, I was like, okay, I get these. I get why people like these. But stuff like Crash, I do not get.
Yeah,
Crash
is terrible, and I think Forrest Gump is also one of the most overrated movies of all time.
I don't necessarily hate Forrest Gump, but that's just one that we had to watch a lot at school, and I was just like, I don't necessarily get. I don't get the why people treat this movie like they do.
Yeah, I don't see the appeal in it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that way about, we talked about like, a whole last year. I've rewatched all of James Cameron's movies, and I feel that way about T2. I feel like that's overrated. Not a bad movie at all, but I just was expecting something more, I guess.
I agree. I mean, I think the first Terminator is stronger, in all honesty. And then
yeah, I agree.
It's just a very bloated, fun movie, and I think that's the same you could say for Aliens. Like, they really have nothing to do with their predecessor movies.
Yeah, I agree. But he worked everything out in the end.
He did. He still has a voice, so that's good.
He does, and that's a very, very interesting filmmaker. Someone that can make something and still show their voice, and then make $1 billion, $2-3 billion at the box office. Good for him.
Yeah, and make a movie every
happy for him
decade,
yeah,
and still be in the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah. Let's see. Just real quick, some more just ones that I think are overrated. House of a Thousand Corpses. No, not for me. Do not like that movie. Babel. I don't know if you've ever seen Babel. Terrible movie. Not a fan of that one.
With Brad Pitt.
Yeah. I'm not big on that one. And then, I guess Crash. Everyone knows about Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm just trying to think of the ones that I have rated lower than
We'll just
average.
pretend Bohemian Rhapsody doesn't exist.
I mean, yeah, single-handedly just ruined any love I had for Queen. Now when their songs come on shuffle, I just keep going, and it feels really bad. I feel bad about it, but I'm like, I just can't. I can't. But higher, the ones that I think are underrated, I got a bunch of those because it's so interesting to see what movies, garner such strong reactions out of people. And then you go and watch them, you're like, oh, is it really as bad as these people are saying? You're like, oh, it's not as bad. Like these are fine. But then sometimes you get really good ones. And you're like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Let me see. I'm trying to think of what's the most hated out of the ones that I like, to where it could be the most underrated. I mean, I really like Batman v Superman. And that one, I feel like people are a little easier on it now. Like people are nicer to it now, but at the time when it came out, they most certainly were not. So I feel like I can say that one, but also, I mean, I really like Unfriended, which is one that people say is like one of the worst movies of all time. I think is incredible. It's like what we talked about earlier about doing something with the medium itself, and just having a whole entire movie in someone's webcam is incredible.
And that was the first time it had ever been done, was Unfriended. And they shot the whole thing in one house. Like, it's independent filmmaking. I think Unfriended is on par with like Blair Witch. I agree. That's some good independent, and that's like shoestring filmmaking.
And that's really, I think, what draws me to them so much is like you can tell the creativity, but you can also tell like they're able to make something that looks like it should make $100 million at the box office with what feels like $100. Like they're just able to do it and make it feel so real, because I love the Paranormal Activity movies too. And that's another one that I guess could be, people really dislike those. I mean, I guess not as much. I don't hear people talk shit about them as much, I guess, but I love the Paranormal Activity movies as well. And it's the same thing. Like they're shot for so cheap, and I think they're terrifying. I think they do an amazing job at atmosphere and how the cameras are set up and just the premise itself. I mean, I remember watching the documentary behind Paranormal Activity, and the guy was like, yeah, I want to do Blair Witch, but I want it to take place in a house in the suburbs. It's like, yeah, that's amazing. That's great. I love that idea.
It's a good concept.
And I really like, I'm not sure if this is the most underrated, but I think it's underrated. I really like the Robert Zemeckis Beowulf. I love that movie. And that's another one that I think is really good, that all I ever hear is people dislike it. And I don't know. Maybe that's just a personal choice. I don't feel like I can get people really behind me on the way I feel about that one, because I like that animation style he had for a couple of years there. I think it looked very visually interesting. It didn't look perfect, but it just feels like using the medium in a different way, making something that doesn't necessarily look beautiful, but still able to tell a story through that form of animation is very interesting to me. And then that story in general is just awesome. So
I mean, that one was done kind of like Avatar, wasn't it? Where it's like all 3D mocap and everything.
Yeah, it was. And obviously the technology is not nearly as good then. And so I just think that makes it so interesting. I love when it feels like they're trying new things. Like you're spending over $100 million to make this movie that you could make live action, but you're doing it to just try to test the waters and test the technology and expand on that medium. And I love stuff like that. I love when people can be experimental like that.
Yeah, it's always a good thing to see when a director is trying to push the envelope a little bit. Even if they fail, it's still just cool to see.
And I feel like that's what a lot of people chalk Beowulf up to, is probably a failure. And the same thing with kind of like, he did Polar Express as well, which I haven't seen that in forever. But people obviously like Polar Express a lot more than Beowulf. But I think that's just kind of what it is. It's like, even if they fail at it, them attempting something is always going to be more interesting and more inspiring than just making it the normal way.
Exactly.
And I
agree. Yeah, I completely agree. Because I mean, even if most critics and stuff, they'll say like, "Oh, ambition can only take you so far," and I'm not going to give you credit, especially if it's not good. And it's like, I don't know. I'm on the other side of that.
I 100%.
to someone who's
100% disagree.
ambitious than someone who
Yeah,
just sits there and makes like cookie cutter stuff their whole career
exactly,
and never takes a
exactly.
risk. Like I feel like that's much
Yeah,
more I feel like that deserves much more criticism than someone actually trying to think outside the box.
yeah, I 100% agree. That's kind of the mindset I try to keep going into any movie, is just that, is like how creative and how different can they be with the same tools that everyone else has, and just seeing what else they can do with it. It's just always more interesting. And that's, not to bring up Marvel movies again, but that's the problem with them. I mean, I'm not watching any of those and thinking this is the worst movie of all time, but that's the issue. I feel like one of those should have taken at least some risks to be maybe considered the worst movie of all time, because then I would respect it a little bit more if they took some risk there. But they don't. They have a formula down. They got it right a couple of times, and now they don't push it at all. They just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and it's like you forget about the movie a couple hours after you watched it, and that to me is worse than watching a bad movie. If a
Yeah,
movie is bad and you think about it for a week or a month or the rest of your life, you think that movie's bad. That is existing forever in some form. I think it's alive in some way. You can think about it. You can learn from it. You can, just theorize what went wrong, what you would have changed. Yet someone makes a bland movie, any piece of art that is just forgettable or just, fades away over time. Like, that's just so depressing to me.
it
Because
really
then you
is.
you still had all, like what we were talking about earlier, about all those different artists coming together to make something, and they make something that doesn't last, that doesn't, bring forward any new ideas or make anyone think about anything. They just watch these people fight for a couple hours. You leave the theater, or you turn off the movie, and then you just never think about it again. And that's so sad. It's just lost forever because they didn't want to try to do something experimental or something new because they're worried about a bad box office or audiences not liking. And it's like,
Yeah,
just sad.
which I guess that kind of takes into the fact of it's Disney, and all they really care about is money mongering and everything, and
Yeah,
they're just
yeah.
like you said, the formulaic approach. But speaking of, I guess, underrated people
Mm-hmm.
and memorable things, I feel like Shyamalan is probably one of the most
Oh yeah.
hated well, maybe not hated, but he's probably one of the most like
Well, I mean,
disrespected directors.
yeah, yeah,
But he makes some of the most memorable and also out of the box films, still within the studio system, still making money, and they're all idiosyncratic, all very
yeah,
personal. And I mean, and I think the best quote I can say about movies that I like is I like films that scar, that you like never forget.
yeah.
And I think The Happening is one of the best examples of that. And
I agree,
it's such a
100%.
hated movie, and still to this day people are like, this is garbage, some of the best, I mean, some
Yeah.
of like the worst performances ever. And
Mm-hmm.
even when I rewatched it, I'm just like, I don't even think Mark Wahlberg is giving a bad performance. Like, it's like I genuinely think this is an amazing movie, and like some of the most memorable scenes still to this day. I've literally never forgotten that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That movie had a huge effect on me because I watched that when I was 9, and the way he frames the people in there whenever they become infected or whatever, that
Yeah,
really, I mean, it's scary, and I can't really describe what's scary about it. Like, the way he frames them is just so unnerving, and
because it's so cold and
it
distant.
is.
It's because every
It's
time
like,
you see them before they're infected, it's like close up face shots, and they feel
yeah.
very personal and intimate. And then as soon as they're not, he like completely distances them from the camera,
And like
and you
shadows
don't see their
obscure their
face.
faces and stuff,
Yeah,
and like, yeah, it's,
all the intimacy is lost.
yeah.
It's like cold and disconnected, and I feel like that's just great directing. That's filmmaking.
It is.
That's
No, I think M. Night Shyamalan's probably the best director working today. Just straight directing, and how he can move the camera and how he can tell his stories. I'm not even saying that his stories are the best. Like, I like Knock at the Cabin, but I think, his direction is better than anyone else that's working right now. His direction is just impeccable, and like all his last few movies especially, he's just been on his A game. He has
yes,
not stepped down. He is just killing it, consistently. And yeah, people do hate on him still, and it's like, okay, you hated his last Airbender movie from over a decade ago. You can let that go now. You can admit that Split was cool, okay, man? Like you can say these things. I see it all the time online. People are still, they like to do the racist thing where they misspell his name or make his name into a joke, and it's like, okay, we get it. You think it's still, 2009, and you think it's cool to shit on this guy, and it's like, but he's so many good movies now, and even if you don't think they're good, you gotta at least respect his effort for what he's doing, and him be like, he's funding his own movies, he's paying for these
Yeah.
movies
All
off of
mid-budget,
the
low
money
budget.
that he earned from the last one. Yeah. And then he's making these stories, and then they make money at the box office, like
Every time.
it's
He
still
he makes a profit
consistently.
every time.
I don't think he's actually had a box office bomb, because people like to complain about that last Airbender movie, but that movie made like $300 million at the box office. So it's like it was still a big payday for him.
Clearly he's doing something right.
Yeah, and I think that as many people that like to talk bad about him and drag his name through the dirt, I think that general audiences still know in some way, like, okay, that's M. Night Shyamalan. Like, that's the guy. He's making something interesting, and I think he's just always going to. He's got it. He's
It's
got the
always
juice.
original stuff too.
Exactly.
That's the best
that
part.
too. Yeah. Or he'll find like a book to adapt, and he'll do it in just such an interesting way, though. Like it's
like old.
really neat. Yeah.
That was a graphic novel called Sandcastle.
Yeah.
It's
Old,
like,
and Knock at the Cabin was as well. That was a book, and it's just amazing for him to be taking those and then adapting them the way that he does. And I know that he changes some stuff in Old, and I think he changed some stuff in Knock at the Cabin as well.
he did. He
to
changed
put
the
his own
ending of
mark
Knock at the
on 'em.
Cabin. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just awesome. Yeah, I love him. He's definitely, I think, the most interesting director working today.
I think that's a pretty valid argument to be made.
Yeah.
And I guess with the to close us out, when do you hope to have your next feature done by?
Well, I'm in pre-production right now, I guess, officially in pre-production, getting everything ready. I'm hoping to shoot this movie in July, and seeing if I can film it all in 1 week is going to be the next challenge. And I think we can, but try July. And my goal is to shoot everything that's not a part of the main part of the movie. Takes place in this western town, and then we're going to have some stuff that happens before then and or around then, that just other places in the movie, but they're smaller scenes. My goal is to film those scenes beforehand, so the last stuff I'm filming is everything that takes place at this town, film there, and then that way when I get home, I will have all of the footage for the entire movie, and I will get to work on editing. So if everything goes according to plan, I hope to have a cut of it done by at least September. And
Okay.
I know that it's a perfect time to get into kind of like the awards festivals kind of start opening up. And so I'm going to try to send it to a lot of those. I really want to get into South by Southwest. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I'm going to try to shoot for that one and a few others. And yeah, we'll just see. I hope it gets a release by the end of the year. That would be great, but I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be able to have a full out release. Maybe a premiere.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah, maybe a premiere, and just to invite some friends and family. But I think that would be it. So yeah, hopefully by the end of this year.
Hell yeah. I love it. Love to hear it.
Yeah, excited.
Well, I appreciate you talking to me.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me on here.
Of course. And Sect is on Tubi, SECT.
Yep.
That your feature debut.
Mm-hmm.
And then your short film that you made before that, One Left, which is almost a feature film. Are you still planning on re-releasing it as a feature film? Because I know you're doing reshoots.
I'm planning on it. The reshoots and everything are done. It's just I'm just editing still. But yeah, I'm planning on it, but we'll see.
Yeah, just another thing to having the tank ready to go.
Yep, exactly.
I'd love to hear it. Well, thanks again for talking to me, and thanks for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Peace out, Chandler.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Go watch a movie.